You haven't got a little framed 1 shilling coin on your boat, have you?
Strangely I do. Up in the forepeak there, can you see that? There's a bolt that comes through there that holds the tabernacle to the cabin front. And I didn't want to sit looking at a bolt head, so I turned up a mount and I found a 1953 shilling at an antique fair, and that's it. And 1953 was the year I was born, so that seemed an appropriate way to cover a bolt up.
Tell me all about this little boat.
This is a Willow Bay shilling, spelt shilling as in old money, 12 pence. It was built in Windermere by a one-man boat business called Willow Bay Boats, run by a lovely man called Phil Swift, who was the designer and the builder. It's cedar strip planked over plywood frames, glassed over the outside and the inside, and then fitted out with marine ply and Iroko. It sleeps 2, and I'll show you how that works a bit later on. It's got a 1-burner stove and plenty of space in the cockpit for washing or reading a book, etc. There are 11 boats in theory, but 2 of them I don't think ever got built. They were plans, so there's 8 or 9 actually extant, and nearly all are yawls. I looked at a yawl, but I decided that it didn't suit me. There was too much string in the cockpit and too busy, so I had this built as a cutter. And she's got a sail area of about 175 square foot and sails very well indeed. On a flat sea with 12-14 knots of wind, it'll do 5.5 knots. And we're in Yarmouth now. I came up from Poole on Tuesday with a beam reach, and I did Poole entrance to Newtown, 20 miles in 4 hours dead, so I averaged 5 knots, albeit with a bit of tide under me, but that's not bad for a 17-foot yacht that's 16 foot on the waterline. She's very steady. It's a light boat, 750 kilos, but it's relatively stiff. It stiffens up when it gets to about 10 degrees off vertical, and I have a habit of, if in doubt, stick a reef in. It doesn't slow the boat down, it makes life a lot more comfortable.
It's a shilling class.
Why a shilling?
Are there any other pennies or farthings?
Yeah, strange enough there are. The first thing Phil designed was a small open traditional boat in ply, and he called it a farthing. And as he got into the business a bit more, he made a slightly bigger one, which I think was either 12 or 14, I can't remember, and he called that a halfpenny. And in about 1998 or thereabouts, he drew this boat, which he called a shilling, which I think was pretty much the biggest he could fit in his barn in Bowness. And he described it then as a camping cruiser. It was a small boat, but you know, you could live on it, provided you were prepared to sort of wash in the cockpit and so on. It's 17 foot overall. It draws with the centre plate up, which runs through the middle here. It draws just over a foot, and with the plate down, about 3 foot. And over spars, it's got a bowsprit, it's 20 feet long. With all my stuff on it, it weighs about 750 kilograms, so it's quite light, and it's got 150 kilos of ballast, 50, 50 and 50 in the plate. So it sits in the water well, and it's a proper yacht in miniature, not a dinghy with a lid. What I liked about it was that it is a yacht, and I range from Poole to Chichester with it, but if I want to treat it like a dinghy, I can sail it straight onto a beach, step off and read a book.
So what is it that's so special about this boat?
What's special about the boat? I fell in love with the shape of it. I thought it was a thing of beauty. It's got a lovely sheer to it. It looks ever so slightly cheeky with the sheer. It's nicely proportioned. I saw an American wearing a t-shirt once that said, "Life's too short to own an ugly boat." And I thought, spot on, and this is not an ugly boat, and I just enjoy being in it, talking about it and sailing the thing. So it's a bit of a love affair. We've got a galley as well. I sorted the layout, so effectively this side is living and this side is sailing. And these little Origo spirit stoves are brilliant. A lot of the small boats here have them, and they run on methylated spirits. Phil, the boat builder, had the problem that if he gave me an installed gas stove, he had to have all sorts of special registrations as a gas fitter. So the Origo stove was the easy way out of that one. Well, it works fine. I just carry a couple of spare bottles of meths in one of the lockers.
Okay, so where do you sleep, Jeremy?
Well, when you look in, it's not immediately obvious because there are no berths, but I'll show you the way it works. Actually, it's very clever, and I think Phil stole it from took the idea from an old Yachting World design and adapted it as he developed the boat. So this folds up and sits on the side rails, and you put the cushion back, and up here I've got my sleeping bag and stuff stowed, and the berth goes up to the next frame. So it's effectively 6'6" long, and here quite generous, and once you've slotted yourself in, it's extremely snug, friendlier. And the same this side, but all the junk that's in the cabin goes in the cockpit, and I have a cockpit tent.
So you've got the same on the other side, so you can actually have a double with a
you could
handrail in the middle.
You could. I mean, it's virtually, we worked the design so the centre box was almost the same height. So you know, with two berths, you've got a fairly flat platform.
Right. Let's see if you fit in there, Jeremy.
I'd have to remove all the sleeping bags and stuff, which is not easy to do.
Oh, okay. We'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But it looks long enough.
It is long enough. Like, as I say, you can see, you know, the washboards are up against the front frame, so it's right under there. It's got blankets and stuff stuffed up there.
Fantastic.
So the frames are on 22-inch spacing, so there's another 22 inches of feet room forward of that one.
Right, okay.
And under here, under these boxes, you can see there's some ballast. In those wooden boxes, there's 50 kilos each side of steel punchings.
Oh, wow. Every little space is...
Every little space is used. I've got all sorts of extra bits and bobs on board, and clothing and stuff.
And of course, you know, if you wake up in the middle of the night and want to have some facilities, you've got them on board.
I do indeed, yeah. I have a bottle that lives down here. A 1 litre Lenore bottle, which
and
is
also
for immediate use. And there was, we struggled. I made a cardboard mock-up of the smallest portable toilet you could get, and we could fit it in, but couldn't find a way to make it usable, so we abandoned that. And I developed my own sort of upmarket bucket and chuck it, which is that, where the plank with a hole sits on the same side runners as the seat base does, and under the cockpit sole I have a small bowl with a lid. So one does what one has to do with the washboards in, and dump it over the side when it's appropriate to do so.
This boat's got everything.
If there's 2 people on board, that's a bit of a tricky option. So if I've got friends on board, generally I'll go into marina so they don't have to suffer the indignity of that. But sailing on my own, which I do 95% of the time, it works fine. I didn't want a boat that drove me to have to buy a bloody great Land Cruiser to tow it round or anything. I wanted something that was manageable, and this Phil provided me with a Brenda up trailer, and I tow this around behind a Golf diesel quite happily. I bought it thinking that I would single hand, and the way the design was set up supports that. You don't have to do anything on the foredeck other than anchor. All the ropes and halyards and sheets come back into the cockpit, and it's got slab reefing on the main, which can be done stood here in the hatch, stood on the centre box. So it's pretty safe in that respect, and it works very well as a one-man boat. How do you stop your beer bottles rattling around under the deck? Well, that's what I came up with. We had a patio door fitted. It came with lots of plastic extrusion around it that I thought that'll come in handy one day, and it has. So no more vibrating beer bottles.
The cellar.
The cellar. It could be wine, but this week it's beer.
And so what do they cost?
I think that's slightly difficult to answer. This was, you know, I signed a contract over 10 years ago, and the boat and the trailer plus all the extras, and I had quite a lot of extras on it, was about 25,000. So you kind of got to want one, because you can buy a lot of boat for 25,000 if you look at the second-hand plastic market, or I could have bought a 50-foot traditional gaffer but I suspect 25,000 would have been the start of it had I done that. But I didn't want to. This suits the sailing that I choose to do. Some people, some of the snobbier ones in big boats, assume I got a small one because I can't afford a larger one, but it was just purely choice. It's what I wanted.